everybody, to the Two Matts and a Jeff podcast. We're just some middle-aged fellows talking sports here. Today, we're going to be talking about our top all-time Philadelphia Phillies pitchers, including relievers and starters. But before we do that, remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and to like our YouTube channel as well. So, top Phillies pitchers of all time. Matt, take it away. Who do you got to start out this list today?
I should say 5 up, right? Five up.
Yeah.
All right. So my fifth is a reliever, and that's my fifth is a starter. My bad. My fifth is a starter. Curt Schilling, I have as my 5. 2.59 ERA and 93 and 4 postseason starts. Curt was a bit of a cantankerous gentleman, or that doesn't really go together, but as a Phillies player. But he really didn't, until 93, he really didn't have the supporting cast that he had in 93. But he sticks in my mind. He's one of my favorites, even though he moved on and had greater success elsewhere. Bloody sock game, all that stuff, or whatever. But Curt Schilling's my 5.
I don't think he gets a whole lot of love in Philadelphia.
No, because
but you can't deny the skill that he has.
Right.
Well, plus he's just a little bit of a different person now too.
Yes.
Like he's a character on his own
yes.
right. So
Yes.
maybe that's another reason
After
he's not
baseball.
getting.
Yeah. I didn't think of that, but yeah. My 4 is Brad Lidge, just because of what he did in that one season. I didn't realize. I remembered, or I found or looked up that he was actually 48 for 48 in save opportunities in that 08 season.
Yes, he was 48 48, but technically, he actually his loss was in the All-Star game.
Really?
Or a blown save or whatever it was in the All-Star game.
Really?
But he technically went 48 for 48.
And I remember he was perfect in that season, but I
Yeah.
think that's the crowning jewel of his career.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not saying he's...
Yeah, for me, I would have a hard time putting him that high. I'm shocked that you have him that high.
I think as we've discussed with the previous Phillies podcast, that, it's sort of like memory, memorable moments type
Right.
thing.
He's definitely one of those guys that's on your list of guys that you really think highly of because of what he did in that season, because they won the World Series, all that storied stuff.
Right.
But his body of work, maybe questionable.
Right after that and everything, yes. Let's see. My number 3 would be Tug McGraw. Again, sort of similar reasons, but I didn't realize, because that is a Wayback Machine or whatever. But I didn't realize he had a 1.46 ERA in 1980. That's pretty good for a whole season.
Yes.
I mean, that's not even just postseason. That's like the whole season or whatever. And again, Tug's on the heartstrings or whatever. So.
Well, you can't forget the clip of him
at
the end.
I
mean, that's memorable.
And he always had I love his throwing motion. Like he just that lefty.
Yeah, well, I never knew until I watched him pitch or heard about him pitching. I never knew what a screwball was. So a screwball, I guess curves this way. A screwball is the opposite way, which I had no idea what that was. I'm not even sure they even call it a screwball anymore these days.
I don't know. Well, interesting, because I read it was a biography about him.
Yeah.
And interesting at that time, and a lot of these guys, this is before the steroid era, but those guys were all taking all kinds of different stuff, and he was definitely taking some amphetamines and stuff. Interesting,
probably maybe juicing a bowl, not juicing, probably putting something on whatever.
Oh yeah, whatever they could get away with. I mean, this was before there was instant replay, before there was all that kind of stuff. So and it was a different game at the time, but definitely a character and a heck of a reliever.
Yeah. So he's my number 3. My number 2, Robin Roberts. I didn't realize that apparently he won 20 or more games in 6 straight seasons. Now, I know maybe the competition back in the day might not have been as great as it was, in the 70s, 80s, whatever, 90s, now up to now or whatever. But even 20 wins in 6 straight seasons, no matter when you do it, is a feat.
That's impressive, yeah.
It is impressive. The one thing about wins that I always struggle with pitchers is it's a team thing, because they only control 50% of the equation. If you look at the current Philadelphia Phillies, for example, is the bats can put runs on the boards, but if the pitchers don't keep the runs down, it doesn't matter. And vice versa is true too. If you're a great pitcher, even if you hold the team to 1 run on the other side, if your team can't put that 2 runs on the board, you lose.
Okay, so, look at Jacob deGrom.
Yeah.
The year he won it. Didn't he win when his wins were whatever? They weren't great because the team wasn't good.
14 or 15 or something like that.
But that said, Robin Roberts is absolutely one of those guys that's got to be on your list, I think.
Yeah. And my number one, obviously, if you're watching instead of just listening, is Steve Carlton. I have a Steve Carlton jersey on. I mean, also for nostalgia for me too. He was like in my prime. I'm older than you guys, so my prime era of Phillies baseball, he was it as far as the Phillies pitchers. I mean, I remember growing up, literally, I'm right-handed and he's left-handed, and literally trying to like throw left-handed like his throwing motion, which was not normal. It was odd or whatever. One of the things I wrote down was he had 27 of the Phillies' 59 wins in 1972. I think that's it said it was like 45 point something % of their wins that year or whatever. So that's just insane. 236 wins, 185 complete games with the Phillies. Now, again, back in the day, complete games were much more common than they are now. And even back then, early in his career with the Phillies, the relievers like Tug, and they didn't even exist even at that. Like Goose Gossage in the late 70s was sort of when the closer came into the fray or whatever. And one of the things I wrote down for him is just, to me, he's definitely up there as possibly the best left-handed pitcher ever in history.
Yeah.
So Carlton, I mean, my number one, but not only for stats and everything, but for nostalgia.
Sure. Oh yeah.
I think that plays into it for all of us. I mean, for guys that were older than us, they're not going to have Carlton as that nostalgic guy. They might have Robin Roberts or somebody else, to look at. But yeah, I mean, you think of that 1980 team, you think of Steve Carlton, no doubt. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have different pages because I kind of numbered them as I started writing all. Because with pitchers, I found myself with a lot of stats. I don't know, like I just started writing all these stats. I'm like, oh, it's just too many. Like, so anyway, my number 5 was Tug McGraw. If you're out there listening and you're not from the Philadelphia area, Tug McGraw is not going to come up, I don't think, on a lot of people's lists because of, I don't think he's that well known, in the overall baseball things. But yes, I mean, he was a 2-time All-Star, which I was surprised at. He has 180 saves, and of course some World Series, and of course we all remembered everything. So he was my one. Let me just look here real quick, making sure. Yeah, he was my one reliever I put in.
I think if you look big picture, if you're doing research on pitchers, in general, you're not going to find many relievers out there in terms of the big pantheon of it. But that's not fair to them in a lot of ways because they're doing a lot of hard work. They just don't get all the notoriety. And if you have a really good quality reliever like your Brad Lidge, who didn't make my list, but you knew when you went to him in those games that he was going to get it for you, just like the Tugger was going to get it. When you
think about your 2 relievers were from the 2 championship teams. So, so he was my 5. Then my number 4, was Curt Schilling. Let me see what else I put in there. The 3.46 overall ERA, over 1,500 strikeouts. He was a 6-time All-Star. Of course, the World Series MVP with the bloody sock and all of that. What else did he have? Over 1,600 innings pitched. So, he was a very durable pitcher as well. Curt Schilling was my number 4. My number 3 was Jim Bunning. I don't think he went back. We were talking before about not going back so far. I don't think he went back too far. And so, when you look him up, he's a Hall of Famer. Yeah. He's a 9-time All-Star. Over close to 1,200 strikeouts just with the Phillies. He was over 2,800 strikeouts overall. 3.27 ERA, but again, he's a Hall of Famer, so that's why I put Jim Bunning in at 3.
And I believe he was either a senator or a senator from Kentucky.
Okay, I'm not sure about that.
Yes, he definitely was a senator.
I mean, check it, Google it, but I think he definitely was a senator from Kentucky.
Yeah. Yes, and he played in Reading because I remember we were with me. We actually tried to go see him, but
I thought that was Robin Roberts. We went. To
that was Jim Bunning.
Jim Bunning. Okay. Was that the one where we waited in the rain?
And couldn't get
we waited in the rain for a long time and then didn't get to see him. And there was no game, so we went home because it was a rain out. Yes. So yes, I do remember that.
That was Jim Bunning. But he died not too long ago.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So my number 2 is Robin Roberts, as you had, Hall of Famer, 7-time All-Star, 1,800 strikeouts, 3.4 ERA. He had his innings pitched for 3,739. So he, again, back in the day, pitched and pitched and pitched. Right. And then my number one, of course, Steve Carlton. I'm trying to think some of the stuff I wrote that you didn't say. He won the ERA title one year. I didn't write what year, but he won the ERA title one year.
Might have been 72 also.
He won 4 Cy Youngs.
Yeah.
He's a 10-time All-Star. He was a Triple Crown winner, I wrote, and a Gold Glover for a pitcher.
Carlton was a Gold Glover. I would have never guessed that.
I didn't either.
I don't think of him as fielding expertise.
I don't know, again, what year said he was a Gold Glove for a pitcher.
Triple Crown pitching, would that be wins, strikeouts?
I tell you the truth, I don't even know what it is.
I should know that.
I do not. That's not.
Sorry, y'all. But
I wrote down a lot of stats on these guys, but that's not what I have.
I know
for
what
him
Triple
or
Crown
anybody
isn't
else.
bad.
Right.
I just didn't know.
Yeah, so that's what I mean.
Yeah,
So,
wow.
like you said, I think, he is, in comparison like a Tug McGraw, he is a very well-known, and like you said, he probably would be one of the best lefties.
Although,
Randy Johnson may have him, but
although media-wise, he was not. The media was not fond of him because he didn't really talk to them, get along with the media.
He's kind of like the Mike Schmidt back,
I saw a quote when I was looking things up about him, and the quote that I forget who said it, but they said at the time there was 2 pitchers that didn't speak English: Fernando Venezuela and Steve Carlton. Because he had a media shutdown. He just did not talk to the media. So Steve Carlton, interesting guy, and we're getting on my list, so I'll talk a little bit about him when we get there, because I found a couple other interesting.
Well, even so, I don't know if he even comes back a lot.
I think he lives in Colorado.
But I mean, even for some of the stuff, it doesn't seem like he comes back very often.
So my list, there's some similar names, and then there's some, you might be surprised. So number 5, I have Tug McGraw. You mentioned all the things about the Tugger already. 2-time All-Star, 180 saves were definitely some of the stats. And I found with the pitchers a lot of stats and that's what's going to differentiate a few of these guys for me. My number 4 I had is Cole Hamels. So, to me, again, World Series MVP.
Yeah.
I think that matters. 3.42 ERA, 4-time All-Star, no-hitter, July 25th, 2015, no-hitter. Go ahead.
We were at the beach together down in Bethany Beach when that happened.
Wow, that I did not recall.
Yeah. I don't remember either.
So I thought Cole Hamels deserved to be on the list.
He's on my fringes.
Although he's, and another thing about these lists that some of these guys, in today's sports more so than back in the day, I think about how much time they spend as a Philly, and I've talked about that in other lists. Yeah. Do I think of them as a Philly or not? Like Tug McGraw spent some time with the Mets and stuff before he came to the Phillies. Cole Hamels has been around, but to me, that big chunk. He started his career, came up through Reading, and he was, he's a Philly and a guy that we would have loved to get back.
I was going to say,
yeah. So anyway, so that's why he's on the list. My number 3 is Curt Schilling. We talked about him already. So I don't know what much more I can tell you about him. 6-time All-Star, 2-time MLB win leader. I don't know if we mentioned that one. So my number 2, believe it or not, is going to be different than you guys. And this doesn't happen often that I've found with us. My number 2 is Steve Carlton.
Wow.
So wow is right. But I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Because I went through a lot of the stats on this. So I'm going to talk about them together. My number 1 is Robin Roberts. Okay. So the reason that I put Robin Roberts ahead just has to do with the categories of statistics that Robin Roberts holds ahead of Steve Carlton on things. And Robin Roberts really was a career Philly, whereas Steve Carlton was not. He spent some time with some other teams. Yeah. Both of them have their numbers retired for the Phillies. So that's there. But Robin Roberts had 231 wins. That's second. And first was Steve Carlton with 241 wins. But Robin Roberts is first in complete games, first in total games, first in innings pitched. He's second in strikeouts. He has 35 shutouts. That makes him third. 7-time All-Star, 4-time MLB win leader, 2 times in strikeouts. Where's this stat I wrote down here that I thought? Oh, in 1950, he started 3 games in 5 days and won a series for the Phillies in 3 games in 5 days.
Wow. And
one of those games, he pitched 10 innings against Brooklyn.
Wow.
Unheard of.
No
like
idea.
Like unheard of today.
Especially today.
So
yeah.
there, so for lefty, he was, third in complete games, second in shutouts, second in games won, second in innings, first in strikeouts. So when I looked at all those categories and things, I thought, you know what? It's hard for me not to put Robin Roberts ahead. Although Robin Roberts isn't a guy that I really watched play. Just in terms of his resume, I felt like Robin Roberts deserved to be ahead of Steve Carlton, even though Steve Carlton is vintage Philadelphia to me, and in my list and all of our lists, those guys jump up a few categories. But, you know, that to me, you know, I put Robin Roberts ahead a little bit. You know, Hall of Famers, great, you know, fantastic. You know, in today's game, they're not pitching a guy 3 games in 5 days, so the opportunity isn't there for whoever
They
to
don't
do
pitch
that.
a guy the next day as a reliever.
But he carried that team. That was in 1950. He just carried that team. You know, unbelievable.
Well, that's so funny because I have a guy down here on because I looked up both starters and relievers separately first, and I have a guy down here from the 50 team named, I guess, Jim Constantine, which I had never heard of.
When you said it, that's because I was looking up stuff.
Who apparently in 1950 was the NL MVP and was completely out of the bullpen until Game 1 of the World Series and started that game. And I wonder if the reason he started that game, which I didn't think about till you just said it, if the reason he started that game is because Robin Roberts had to pitch 3 games in the championship series to go into the World Series.
Could be.
Probably.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why, because he was through that's the first start he got all year was in the World Series, and he was
Probably because,
What I think is funny is he was out of the pen all year. He was 16-7 out of the pen with 22 saves, which was like really? It was just bizarre. But when you said that I was like, well, I wonder if that's why he started Game 1 of the World
Well,
Series.
pitching is so, you know, how many guys I can think of no one today who's pitching 10 innings.
Oh my goodness! No.
And not in those circumstances either, but 10 innings. Yeah. You know, you look at that stuff and it's just, how did the guy's arm not fall off? Yeah. I mean, I know they're not throwing as hard back in 1950 as they are today, but you're still throwing. Yeah. How many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches did that guy throw in 5 days? Right. Wow. Yeah. So, any guys worth mentioning, honorable mention?
Well, I was just going to say, so that's one of the guys I had listed, because more because of the oddity of it than anything or whatever, but apparently it was good as well. A couple of relievers. So, you mentioned I forget what you said, Matt, or whatever. Not guys but from nostalgia, but also who had important roles on teams or whatever. I remember back in the day, Ron Reed was a pitcher who was basically like a setup man for Tug. Same with Ryan Madsen. With Brad Lidge or whatever, yes, and then exactly, and then of course Mitch, I have him down just because as much for his antics as his pitching, and you know he did blow 93 or whatever, but you know
great analyst now and stuff. I mean, I like listening to him too. Surprisingly, because the wild thing you think would just be whatever, but he does a nice job. I really think.
Right, and a couple of leaders real quick. Steve Bedrosian, who won the NL MVP that one year, and of course Papelbon, who apparently I didn't realize, but he's the all-time saves leader for the Phillies. I guess because of it probably would be someone like Tug or someone else if they.
Listen, I got to tell you, it offends me that you put Papelbon on your list. That's offensive.
I put him down only because I read that he was the all-time saves leader. Otherwise, I
saw that too when I was looking up stats, but I couldn't bring myself to put that guy on any list.
Or whatever.
Oh, no way. That guy just. Oh.
Yeah. And real quick, I had Cole Hamels, obviously close to right in there. Chris Short, I guess, back in the day or whatever. These are starters. Obviously, Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, and then way back in the day, I guess, Grover, Cleveland, Pete Alexander, which if we would include way back in the day, he might have been even like my number 2.
Yes, I was going to say, when I was looking, and because he's on the national list of a bunch of people. Yeah. Just going through, it was the Roy Halladay thing is, because he wasn't here that long.
Right.
I had him up there too, because how can you not? Because such a great pitcher. I mean, if you look, I wrote some stuff. He was two-time Cy Young winner, 8-time All-Star. We didn't realize how, much of other things he was going through. We can tell you too. We were in Florida and we were seeing, on a backfield, seeing
when he
him
was
struggle.
Broken down and there were problems, seeing him struggle.
Very difficult.
But we also got to see the no-no live, which is was something to behold.
Yes.
Of a great pitcher. You don't do that in anything, but definitely in the playoffs.
Right. Again, I wrote down Cliff Lee as well. He was a Cy Young winner, 4-time All-Star. He was an ERA title winner. I had Cole Hamels. Going through some of my relievers, Mitch Williams, Papelbon, Ron Reed, and I always put because of the 80 and the 08 teams. I had also as well Ron Reed, Ryan Matson.
That's why. It's
just because when you think about championships, exactly. I mean, and then another name when you're talking about a lot of saves, probably because he was on bad Phillies teams, was Jose Mesa. He was
Joe Table.
He had, but he had like loads of saves too. But again, they were not that good.
So and that's where it's tough. Is the great players or really good players that play on subpar teams. It's hard to whatever. But before I get to my honorable mentions, I forgot to mention this story that I saw about Carlton that was really interesting. Did you know they had a blue room for him? A blue room. They had he wanted a blue room where he would meditate and stuff before starts. The Phillies made him a blue room, and this is back in the 70s before meditation and stuff like that was popular. Wow. Kind of weird, funky stuff. So yes, he had a blue room where he would meditate, and then of course you mentioned this before. He had his own catcher,
personal catcher, Tim McCarver.
Yes.
Yep.
So Steve Carlton, like it seems like all great pitchers, pretty much are quirky, and they have all these different things, which that job of being a starting pitcher is much mental as it is the physical.
Yeah.
So, I've really had only a short list of guys in my honorable mentions, and you guys mentioned some of them, but the two guys that I highlighted in there for me, which were Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay. Roy Halladay, great pitcher, wasn't a Philly long enough, in my opinion, in his body of work. But I would have put, if I were ranking, I would put Cliff Lee over him as far as his body of work in Philadelphia. And Cliff Lee did a lot of great work in some of those playoff games. You knew when he was going out there that he was money, that he was going to win you the game. You had utter confidence in the win when Cliff Lee was out on the mound. And so, he's a guy that I think it.
It still pains me to this day that the year they brought in Halladay, they traded away Cliff Lee. I still think if they somehow kept Lee and got Halladay, that we have another World Series team.
Oh yeah.
And I think they could have. I think they tried. They sold it at the same time.
Right.
But they were mutually exclusive events. They didn't go together.
Financially, I think they could have.
Right. Yeah. That's how they sold that to make it palatable to the fan.
Right. Exactly.
So you didn't freak out.
Right.
But the truth is, you're right. I mean, if they could have kept those guys, yes.
Yeah. I just like to bring up that when we all got the chance to go down to see spring training, and when we got to see all those pitchers we just talked about on the same field, and this is for all you young players out there that we got to see all 5 of them were out there and they were doing batting practice, and then the coach that was with them made them all go out and pick up every ball out in the outfield.
There
were multi-millionaire guys walking out there. Any one of us would have went out and picked up a ball for them. But they made those guys go out and pick up every little ball.
And what I like about that, in addition to that, they were batting, which to me, pitchers should be hitting. Because baseball, you should be playing both sides. Designated hitter, I'm not a fan. I'm not to go down that road because that's not the discussion for today. But that, that they played all parts of the game. They played as a team, and that year, if you don't remember that team, they had 4 aces and Joe Blanton.
Yeah.
And and high caliber guys, because Joe Blanton they made to feel part of the group when he really wasn't the kind of quality pitcher that the other guys were. So a lot of high character there, and despite whatever flaws all those guys had, that they were high quality guys. So, all right, any last words on pitchers for the Philadelphia Phillies?
That's it from me.
All right, so you've been listening to the Two Matts and a Jeff podcast. We were reviewing our all-time greatest Philadelphia Phillies pitchers. We hope that you will like us on Instagram and Facebook and like our YouTube channel and continue to listen to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.